This is the last installment of this Tom Dooley series. I could have made many more videos with several more details about the case, details that I have discovered through 17 years of research, a research that I'm not done with, by the way, so maybe, just maybe, there will be additional videos in the future. This will probably be a rather long video, and I apologize for that in advance. Where the first 4 videos have been based solely on facts, most of this video is based on pure speculation, but speculation based on the facts that I have discovered and disclosed in previous videos, but also from other facts from my research. Some of these facts I hope to disclose in a future book where I can go deeper into what I have found than in these relatively short videos. As usual in these videos, the photos are my own, while the drawings and paintings are made by the late Edith Ferguson Carter, founder of the Whippoorwill Academy and Village in Ferguson, North Carolina, and used with her permission. By the way, if you ever come to this remote part of North Carolina on the 3rd Saturday of the month between April and October, I should suggest you go and visit the museum. It is now run by Edith Carter's daughter, Margaret Carter Martini, and it's well worth the visit, at least if you're into local history, old buildings, and beautiful art. But let me get to the point. Who killed Laura Foster? Well, we know that a young man, Tom Dooley, an ex-Confederate soldier, was convicted and executed for the murder. But did he actually commit it? I, and many with me, doubt it. Allegedly, he wrote a confession, but if he actually did, it is doubtful. He denied having anything to do with Laura Foster's death all through trial, and even standing at the gallows he denied and said that he wouldn't have been standing there had some of the witnesses not committed perjury. According to the man who actually was in possession of the confession, defense lawyer Richard M. Allison, he said that he had been asked not to disclose the confession until after Tom's death. But why would Tom deny at the gallows if he knew that only a few minutes later his confession would be disclosed? I simply do not think this is reasonable. Also, the confession was formulated in a kind of general get-out-of-jail-free card, so it would be used for whoever may later be accused of being involved in the murder. If Tom just wanted to help to save his co-accused lover, Ann Melton, he could simply have written, "Ann Melton had nothing to do with Laura Foster's murder and knew nothing about it," or "I killed Laura Foster, nobody else." But instead the confession said, "I declare that I am the only person that had any hand in the murder of Laura Foster." To me, that doesn't sound like words that a reasonably uneducated man would use, so maybe it was dictated by the lawyer. It's especially the phrase, "I declare," that I find unlikely for an uneducated man from rural North Carolina to have used. Besides from that, I don't think that the time schedule that was revealed in court would have allowed Tom Dooley the time to kill Laura Foster, unless, of course, she hid in the woods for more than a day, waiting to get killed. The motive used by the prosecution, that Laura had given Tom the pox, seems unlikely, as Tom had sexual relations with many other women as well, including Pauline Foster, Caroline Barnes, and Ann Melton, and any of those could have given him the syphilis. Contrary to popular belief, Tom never said that he would kill Laura Foster. He remarked to his second cousin, Rufus Dula Hall, that he would kill those who had given him the disease. That is, Tom used plural, and no names were ever mentioned, and I think it was just an outburst that many people could have made in a frustrated state of mind. "I'll kill him for this." But if Tom didn't kill Laura Foster, then who did? Well, if you ask people in the local area or listen to the old stories that goes around in the area, either a vengeful Ann Melton did because she was sure that Tom had been infected with syphilis from Laura Foster and had given it to her, and now she wanted revenge, or her maid Pauline Foster did because she was jealous of Laura. If Anne was the killer. Jealousy may also have been a motive, as she knew that Tom had other lovers besides from her. On the other hand, she herself had other lovers than Tom, at least according to one testimony given at the trial, though it was never confirmed by anyone else but this witness. Local rumors would know that she had slept around during the war when both her husband and Tom Dooley were away. But as mentioned before, why would she want to kill Laura? It would have been more reasonable if she had killed Tom Dooley, no matter if it were out of jealousy or vengefulness, as he couldn't know if it actually were Laura and not one of Tom's other lovers who had infected him, if that was the reason. Most likely he had probably gotten infected from Pauline Foster, who admitted in court that she suffered from syphilis that she had contracted while still back home in Watauga County. Also, either of the two girls would have had trouble killing Laura and burying her according to the time schedule, but of course they could have joined forces. If that was the case, a common jealousy may have been the motive. On the other hand, both of them slept with Tom Dooley, so why not be jealous of each other, or one or more other of Tom's lovers? And if they acted in consort, other people must have lied to protect them, as James Melton and Jonathan Gilbert both worked in the fields with Pauline Foster that day, and more people who visited the Melton home told in court that they found Anne in bed all day. George Washington Anderson testified that when he visited the Melton cabin, he found Anne in bed. Her shoes and the bottom of her dress were wet, which corresponded very well with the claim she herself made that she had been out in the hills all night with Tom and her mother, the three of them sharing a canteen of liquor. So no, I don't believe the murder was committed by one of the usual suspects. Who else could have committed the crime? Well, even if it was a rural area, there actually lived quite a few people in and around Elkville and German Hill, Laura's home, as well as in neighboring settlements along the Yadkin River and its tributaries like Reedy Branch. And looking at records, apparently Tom, Anne, and Pauline were the only ones that was ever suspected by the sheriff and the prosecution, but a lot more could have done the deed, or at least not be ruled out as suspects. The prosecution claimed that the murder was premeditated and that the grave was dug in advance. The grave was shallow and too short for the body, and in my opinion, if one or maybe two people had been digging for most of the day and the whole night, they would have had the time to dig a grave large enough for the body so they wouldn't have had to bury Laura on her side with her legs pulled up in order for her to fit in the grave. Even if it was dug in relatively difficult terrain, but it was no more difficult than whoever did the deed was able to carry the body to the place, and later a horse could go there as well. I have spoken to a police detective who had been investigating homicides for more than 25 years, and he told me that in all those years he had never come across a premeditated murder committed with a knife with only one single stab wound in the chest. If a knife had been used for a murder, either the throat had been cut or several stabs to the body had been dealt, as it is simply too uncertain if a single stab to the chest hit the heart or is in any other way fatal, which probably some of the people retelling their own version of the story is also aware of, as in many versions of the story, Laura had been stabbed several times, and some even tells that he had signs of blunt force trauma to the head. But actually, Dr. Carter only found one stab wound and didn't mention anything about any head wounds. So in my opinion, the murder happened by accident. When investigating a crime, the police, among other things, look into who had means, opportunity, and motive. When it comes to means, my guess is that almost everyone in the area would have had access to a knife. A knife was considered a tool, not a weapon, even if it could, of course, be used as a weapon, and many men and even some women were carrying knife on them at most times. We don't know much about opportunity though, as only the whereabouts of a very few people at the likely time of the murder is known today, and even for those, only part of what they did is known, and was probably not even mentioned at the trial. So an unknown number of people may have had the opportunity. And as for motive, we don't know either. Laura may have infected others with syphilis. Other men and women may have been jealous. She was known to be morally frail, and was not the innocent girl that later legends had turned her into. If that was the case, the accusation from the prosecutor that she had given Tom the pox would be ridiculous. And there can have been other motives as well. So once again, who killed Laura Foster? Well, we will never know, as it may have been someone who is not even mentioned in neither the official records nor the legends. But even if it was one of the people we know of today, it will be impossible to prove, unless some evidence suddenly appears out of the blue, like a confession written on a deathbed of someone and disappeared until now, or if a time machine is invented. But even if we rule out the unknown killer, it would be very difficult to identify who did it, even if a couple of people jump into mind because of their behavior after Laura's disappearance. Let me have a look at those. We know that Laura left her home on her father's horse, not her own, as some legends will know. When her father woke up and discovered that the horse was gone, he followed the tracks, which he claimed was easy as he had been busy trimming the hoofs the previous day, but hadn't completed the job, so the horse left a distinctive mark. Wilson Foster followed the tracks along the path from his cabin to the road that went along the river, and followed the tracks until he reached Elk Creek. Here, Stony Fork Road branched off, and as Laura followed that, so did Wilson. Stony Fork Road was not much more than a path at that time, but he must have managed to follow the track anyway. At Bates Place he lost the tracks, he testified in court, and this is where, in my opinion, he began to act strange. Instead of looking for Laura and the horse in the woods surrounding Bates Place, he just gave up on his search and went to have some breakfast. And he did not go to the home nearest to Bates Place, but visited the Scott residence, even though he on his way there must have passed several other homes. He had breakfast at the Scotts, then moved on to the Melton home and stayed there for a while. Only later that day did he go to other homes in the area asking for Laura and his horse. In the evening of Laura's disappearance, he was back at the Melton cabin, where he took part in a party where a not small amount of alcohol was consumed. According to Pauline Foster's statement in court, he claimed that he didn't care about Laura as long as he got his horse back, but Wilson denied ever having said that. After the party, he went to the home of James Melton's brother, Francis, and spent the night there. Next morning, he returned to his own home without continuing the search for Laura. Back home, he discovered that his horse had returned with a broken bridle, but not even that made him resume his search for his daughter. Even when several searches were carried out in the days and weeks following the disappearance and the return of the horse, he apparently did not take part in these searches. And here comes the first speculation. Maybe, just maybe, he didn't lose track of the horse, but caught up with Laura and wanted his horse back. Maybe she wouldn't return it, so he got out his knife and tried to cut loose the horse from where it was tied. Laura may have tried to stop him, and he accidentally stabbed her with a knife. When he discovered that he was dead, he left the area and returned later to get the body, carry it away, and bury it in the quickly dug grave. Possible? Definitely. Unlikely? Not really, I think. At least this is something that should have been investigated at the time. Another man that acted somewhat strange was Colonel James Misspell. Misspell was more than anybody else the man behind the search for Laura. He was present at all the searches, even months after the disappearance, and in the end it was Misspell and his father-in-law who found the grave. And he paid for the assistance to the public prosecutor during 4 trials and 2 appeals. The problem is nobody knows why he was so eager to find the body and get Tom convicted. In court, he said himself that he didn't feel any animosity against Tom and he only did what he did for the public good. There is no evidence, though, that he did anything like it neither before or after the Dooley case. At the gallows, Tom insisted that James had committed perjury against him and that the only thing he testified about was a map of the area that he had drawn. I show the map later. Almost the only thing he could have lied about was the reason for his involvement. Maybe Tom knew something that was not mentioned at the trial, as he himself was never put at the witness stand. Even the author, John Foster West, gives up on explaining this and only says that maybe it was because he and the Foster family were inhabitants of the same county. That doesn't sound right, though, as there were other murders in Caldwell County, the home of James Misspell, in which he didn't intervene in any way. Some legends will know that Laura worked for him, others that her father did, and maybe that was the case, but it is not documented anywhere in public records, and many sources have them working for other employers. Some sources will know, undocumented of course, that James Misspell also had an affair with Laura Foster, and that she infected him with syphilis, and as he was a married man from the upper class, it was unacceptable, and therefore he killed her, or rather had her killed. That is why he knew the vicinity of the grave and could easily lead his father-in-law's horse to the place where the horse snorted and thus brought attention to the grave. Possible? Maybe. Unlikely? Yes. Personally, I don't believe that James Misspell had anything to do with the killing. I do believe, though, that he may have had another reason for wanting Tom convicted, but I will tell more about that in my book about the case, if I ever manage to complete it. Some legends also like to point their fingers at 2 other men, Jack Keaton and Bob Cummings. Jack Keaton was supposedly Tom's mother's much younger half-brother, only about 10 years Tom's senior, and also, according to legend, a suitor of Laura's. The problem with Jack Keaton is that his existence can't be documented anywhere. He is not mentioned in any official records, neither from the trial nor in any census records. Mary Keaton Dooley's father most likely remarried, but no evidence show that he had a son or that this son was named Jack. Legends will know that he was arrested together with Tom, but was set free as he could provide an alibi. This doesn't sound likely, though, because when Tom was arrested, all public records tells that he was alone. And how could anyone provide an alibi, as nobody at the time of the arrest even knew that Laura was dead then? Some legends also claim that he was present at the party in the Melton cabin, which was placed near the tall trees in the center of the picture on the night of Laura's disappearance, but he isn't mentioned in any of the testimonies that tells about that party. And as for motive, it is very difficult to see why would he have killed Laura if he actually was in love with her. Some legends claim that the murder was instigated by Anne Melton, who talked Jack Keaton into killing Laura by promising him her favors. Possible, maybe, unlikely, definitely, I'd even say impossible. But if not Jack Keaton, then how about Bob Cummings? According to legends, he was a Yankee schoolteacher who had come to Elkville after the Civil War and had fallen in love with Laura. When Laura disappeared, he was the one who instigated the searches for her and kept on searching for months, and it was Cummings who finally found the grave. It was also Cummings who followed Tom into Tennessee, arrested him and Jack Keaton, and brought them back to Wilkesboro. He also provided the witness Betty Scott that gave the crucial testimony at Tom's trial. None of this is true, though. I have already mentioned that James Isbell was a driving force behind the search for Laura, and it was Isbell who finally discovered the grave. Tom was arrested by two deputy sheriffs, John Atkins and Ben Ferguson, assisted by a local farmer, Colonel James Grayson. And finally, but Cummings didn't provide any witnesses, the sheriff did. A few versions of the story, though, insist that Cummings got jealous because Laura preferred Tom to him and got to her home in German Hill. The modern-day German Hill is shown in this picture, in the morning of the day she disappeared, and lured her away from her home and then killed her at Bates' place. This legend doesn't mention anything about how he lured her away, if he was in love with Tom and not him. Unfortunately for the legends, Bob or Robert Cummings is just as elusive as Jack Keaton. He was never mentioned in neither trial records nor newspaper article, and he is not found in any census record or other public records from the time. There was a few Bob Cummingses around in the United States at the time, but none of them were anywhere near western North Carolina. So I believe that Bob Cummings is simply an invention of the legends to put a bit of romance into an otherwise sad and boring story. Is it possible that Bob Cummings killed Laura? I don't think so. Is it unlikely? Yes, it definitely is. I have another theory, though, and I admit that it is based solely on my own imagination. I have no documentation for it whatsoever, but even if I can't document anything, I think it could be true. This picture shows the map that James Isbell drew for the trial. Even if he claimed that it was accurate, it was not really. Just as an example, if you look at the map, it looks like the distance between Elk Creek a little right of the center of the map and Reedy Branch a bit further right, and between Elk Creek and Linville Creek to the left is about the same, but in reality the distance from Elk Creek to Linville Creek is double the distance between Elk Creek and Reedy Branch. Also, the river doesn't run in a straight line, but is actually rather winding in this particular area. You can see that from the yellow line in the inserted photo in the left lower corner. Also, the river runs in a northeasterly direction, not in a southeasterly direction as shown on Isbell's map. But anyway, the map is all we have, so we'll have to do with this. The red line shows the route that Laura followed according to James Isbell. Before she got to Bates' place, she had stopped outside A.P. Scott's home, the Green Circle, where she met her neighbor Betsy Scott and had a chat with her, at least according to Betsy's testimony. Later she was seen by Theodosia Witherspoon and her sister when she rode past their home, the Purple Circle. But as you can see, she got even closer to Lottie Foster's home, the Blue Circle, where, according to Lottie's testimony, her boys, Pinckney and Thomas, were working in the fields, but none of them reported having seen Laura riding by. Why? And that brings me to my undocumented theory. I think that maybe one of Melton's brothers saw Laura riding by, most likely her younger brother Thomas Foster. He was not a stranger to sex at the age of 17. We know from trial records that he had slept with Pauline Foster at least once, or maybe he had even had a relationship with Laura as well. We don't know that. Or maybe he wanted to have a relationship now, as he knew her reputation of being, in modern language, an easy lay. So he followed her to Bates' place, came onto her. But she did not want his attention and pulled out her knife to scare him away. They got into a fight, and he stabbed her by accident. Maybe he told his family what had happened, and maybe they helped him hide the body. This could explain that none of them admitted having seen Laura that morning. We know from testimonies at trial that Thomas Foster had had a quarrel with Tom Dooley some time before the murder. We don't know what it was all about, but maybe it had been Tom's relationship with Laura combined with his relationship to Thomas Foster's older sister. So this is just another theory. Is it possible? Yes, I think it is. Is it unlikely? Probably, but I like it anyway. Many other theories could probably have been put forward, and this alone is the reason that Tom should have been acquitted. He was convicted on circumstantial evidence alone, and if that is to be, the rule is that no other explanation can be brought forward, and in this case many likely explanations could have been brought forward. So in my opinion, the circumstantial evidence was never strong enough to convict, especially because some of the witnesses against Tom could have been suspects themselves and may have lied in court in order to protect themselves. But if the circumstantial evidence was so weak, why was Tom Dooley convicted? In my opinion, it had something to do with politics, not the fact that the prosecution team were all Republicans, some of the judges were as well, while the defense team were Democrats. We know that later Richard Allison from the defense team and Nathaniel Boyden from the prosecution team was on different sides in the impeachment trial against Governor Holden, but I think it was a different kind of politics. The war was just over, and North Carolina was still occupied by Union troops and under control of a Union military district to which even the legislative assembly and the governor were subordinate. I think that the justice system as such just wanted to prove to the Union occupational forces that they would not let a murderer go free, even if he had been a Confederate hero. Some people think that Laura Foster may have been a Union sympathizer. There were actually a lot of those in western North Carolina during the war, and that was just to made it even more necessary to convict someone of the murder. And Tom Dooley was simply at hand. So, who killed Laura Foster? We will never know, but now you have a couple of theories yourself to choose between and make up your own mind, or maybe come up with a whole different theory. I show these two photos just to correct a common mistake. The photo on the left is very often on the internet and elsewhere mistakenly promoted as showing Tom Dooley, also in the Wikipedia article about him, but it is not the case. It is not a picture of Tom Dooley, but of an unknown soldier, and not even a Confederate at that, but a Union soldier. But he's wearing grey, I hear you say. Yes, but I'm not so sure. I think the black and white photo just makes it look like that, and even if it is true that most Union troops wore blue and most Confederates wore grey, there were many exceptions, especially in the first years of the war, where standard uniforms were not used, and most regiments just dressed in what they could get. What most indicates that his Union is a double cross belt. These were only worn by Union privates and never by Confederates. The picture on the right is actually showing an unknown Confederate soldier. Not Tom Dooley, by the way, but I think he looks like the description of Tom Dooley, at least as I see him. He was young. Tom was only 20 when the war was over. Dark, curly hair and grey eyes. Even from this picture, I see the eyes as grey, but maybe it's only me. And I would like to stress that it is not Tom Dooley, but he may look something like that. Well, thus I complete my Tom Dooley video series, unless I learn something new that demands a new one, but I believe that whatever future research brings to light, I will publish it in written form. So I will end this video series by thanking at least some of the many people who have contributed to my knowledge about the case, and for all the people involved in it in one way or another, and all the other people from Western North Carolina that received me so well during my visits to the area. The names are in alphabetical order, not in order of importance, though I owe a special thank you to Charlotte and Bill, who introduced me to most of the others. Thank you all for your help. I hope to see you all again soon. And thank you for watching. If you like this video and want to see more videos from the United States and Denmark, just press the subscribe button. That will be all for now.